I'd like to call the meeting to order. Could the secretary please call the roll?
Holloman and Moss present.
This proceeding will be broadcast on Channel 35. We have a single item today. Do we have speaker cards?
Yes, I have one speaker card for item number 1.
Would the speaker prefer to speak now or after the presentation? After? Okay. All right. Well, why don't we go right into the presentation, Mr. Nichols?
Very good. And before we do get into our presentation today, there's an item that we'll be making some reference to, but I think it bears importance because of the water conditions that we're experiencing. And it will influence ultimately our water costs as we go into this next fiscal year. It is not a budget item, but despite the fact that we had a really wonderful rainy year and a lot of snowpack last year, in fact, nearly a record year last year, we are seeing the exact opposite of that this year. We've had a little bit of respite, thankfully, in the last couple of weekends of the storms that came through here, more so in the storm weekend before last. But despite that, we are definitely going to see a very significant swing in the water supply out of the Eastern Sierras, which supplies our supplies that come from through the LA Aqueduct, which typically provides about a third of our water supply. It provided well over that last year. It appears to be providing likely much below that this year. While we are officially into spring, snow still can fall and has, and hopefully we'll have some more in April. And the information is still not complete right now. We're at the point where we're still going in and making measurements on that. It appears that we have somewhere around 35% of average normal year snowpack right now. Now, thankfully, due to the fact we had so much water and so much snow and melt from last year, we'll have, we believe, better than that water supply in the Eastern Sierra, hopefully maybe somewhere around maybe 55% or so. Again, that's a preliminary number. But irrespective, that's way low. I mean, it's 55% of average conditions. So we are going to be looking at having to purchase more water than average, and obviously much more water than we did last year from Metropolitan Water District. We'll be talking today about some efforts that are in our budget to help make some ramp up to our water conservation efforts. That's really important. It's important for our customers to do everything they can do and have continued to do here in the last few years this year. And the reason that's important that we all do things on even on a voluntary basis is if we can keep our water consumption down as a total utility for all of our customers down low enough, we can stay within more within the first of the two tiers of MWD water. MWD has two tiers. The first tier is about $560 an acre foot. The goes up to about $686 is something like around there, over north of 680 if I recall correctly, for the second tier of water. So, and that starts at a certain volume level. So if we can continue to do as well as we've done in recent years, and preferably even better, we will save more per acre foot of water that we have to procure from MWD. So I want to make sure that we're going to be working all summer to make clear to people that that's an important item, and you'll see some discussion in some of our budget for this year is to ramp up our water conservation programs, which we would be doing irrespective of this dry year, but it's particularly important. So I just wanted to make sure that doesn't get lost in the more detailed discussions we're going to have here today. Well, what we are going to discuss today is a preliminary fiscal year 12-13 budget, the fiscal year that starts this July. And it is a new process and a timeline that we'll talk briefly about. This is a preliminary budget. We're not adopting a budget today. We'll talk about some of the programs that are driving our budgets and presenting them in a way that I think we'll be seeing year over year, year after year, some of the key programmatic things that we're doing in water and in power and the things that are driving our budget, and talk a little bit about the timeline for our formal budget adoption. And I'll be covering some of these, and Phil Leiber, our CFO, will be covering some of these slides as well. So we'll go back and forth on some of this. In terms of where we are, we're in a new process this year in developing our budget. Measure J last year was passed by the voters, and that requires that we have a preliminary budget filed by March 31st. That's much earlier, and that's why we're here earlier than we have been before. We did, just as a reminder, and I know we've discussed this a couple of times, we presented a budget to this board on January 25th, saying what would a zero rate increase for both water and power for fiscal year 12-13 look like, and what would be the implications of that. We went over that, we talked about that. I'm not going to repeat all of that here today. I have provided you, for your convenience, copies of that, and that, of course, has been provided, is online, has been provided previously to the public. There were a number of operational impacts that were extraordinarily problematic with that. So what we have here today is a recommended budget for this upcoming fiscal year that does include some assumptions on rate increases. Now, we're not here today to talk about rate structures and the rates. That will be forthcoming quite soon, and we'll have a whole process that will go over the summer on that. But I felt it important that for everyone to recognize, obviously for certain for the board to recognize, that the budget that we're going to be presenting to you today for the next fiscal year does assume that we are not at the zero rate increase level, and we are looking to take care of a number, not all, but a number of the operational, very serious operational problems that would have been associated with that budget that we discussed back in January. And as we look at our current budget, it's just a reminder that, as I know we all know well, that there were no rate increases last year. And we've had to defer and cut and continue to cut programs, defer programs, cut costs, and we've cut some $75 million out of the water system and about $85 million out of the power system for both capital and operation and maintenance costs this current year, simply to be able to live within our means, with some, not trivial repercussions of not being able to have that funding available. I think most people realize that next year is the end of LADWP's first century as a utility. And so we are embarking upon soon our second century of service of water and power to the city of Los Angeles. And as we do that, there are just a number of programs that we're doing, programs that affect our budget, not just this year, but the next year and many years after, that are going to be a consistent theme and a consistent requirement that are multi-year programs that we're doing. It involves a number of regulatory mandates and some things that we need to do by virtue of the fact that it is a 100-year-old system. We are really transforming, as we've spoken many times about, with our water supply and our power supply, and we're really embarking upon that effectively, last year and really starting to ramp that up this year. The power system, we're going to just in the next roughly decade or so, we're going to be replacing over 70% of our power plants, mainly to meet mandates. And on the water system, we've already talked this year about the fact that we need to do over $1 billion just to meet safe drinking water requirements on that, and that we have a lot more that we need to do on the piping system. So those are the types of things that are driving our system. There's a number of objectives that we show up here and in your package. And by the way, I assume everyone has copies. I think we need enough copies for the audience on this presentation, hard copies. But we have some key programs that I'll go over at a high level here today for both power and water that significantly influence both our capital programs and our O&M budgets, and as a result, ultimately will affect our rates as well. Our goal is to meet all of these requirements while still keeping both our water and our power rates competitive. Starting first with our power system, usually we start with our water system, so I thought turnabout would be fair play. We'll talk power first here this time. No offense, Jim. But the key programs here are at our power supply replacement program is all of these three elements here, the rebuilding of our local power plants, much of which is driven by once-through cooling requirements. We've talked about that. I'll talk about that a little bit more. Our mandates to maintain and ramp up our renewable energy and our transition out of coal. These really aren't separate items. These are all integrally related items that really drive a lot of our power budget and our rates. Our reliability program, in terms of replacing our system, we'll talk more about that here today, is an annual, many-year annual investment that we need to make. And one of the things that we want to make a little clearer, some of the things that is talking about what we refer to as our customer opportunities program in both energy efficiency and customer installed solar. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And these are all items that affect this upcoming year budget. When we talk about power supply replacement, some of the key elements are the rebuilding that we're having to do of all three of our coastal power plants, of which there's 9 units. And the main driver of that is indeed that requirement by the State Water Resource Control Board for elimination of once-through ocean cooling. But in addition to that, those plants, and some of those plants will be fast start plants that can follow, particularly Haynes 5 and 6 units that we're midway through construction right now, to better follow the ups and downs of the operations of the intermittent operations of our wind and increasing solar resources. We've got about a good portion of the work done on Haynes Unit 5 and 6 in terms of expenditures. We've recently had good media coverage of what we've accomplished down there and the major projects that we're developing. It's about $123 million of our capital budget this coming year. We're also right on the heels of that, starting up on our Scattergood 3, which is our largest true coastal plan, really on the ocean itself, if you will, as opposed to on the more inland canal waterways. And we will be making major commitments in this fiscal year for that turbine generator equipment for that project.
Well, let me ask you a question. Is it fair to say that the building of the power plants, one way or the other, is driven by regulatory issues, whether or not it's once-through cooling or it's the balancing we do to accommodate our renewables?
Certainly the plants that we're doing right now, I mean, ultimately, in the next 40 years, we would have been replacing these plants as they got beyond their useful life. But the timeline by which we're making these commitments and accelerating that is all 100% is regulatory driven. The other major piece of our power supply program is renewable energy. And we're at 20%. We're mandated to maintain an average of 20% through 2013. We've actually slipped below that. And some of our short-term contracts expired, and we have to backfill those. We also have to make some commitments this year to power plants, renewable plants that would be built in subsequent fiscal years, but we have to make commitments in this year as we not only maintain our 20%, but we have to get up to 25% by 2016. It's about a $20 million increase for renewable energy this year, and again, that is regulatory driven to meet that specific requirement, which became law last April. The power reliability program is another major item. We cut that program significantly last year when we had to defer our rate adjustment. We cut some $60+ million out of that budget last year. We are proposing a level that gets back up. I should take that back. It's more like over $75 million. We're back at a level here that is below where our long-term projection was to be. It kind of gets back up just a little bit in line with where we were a couple of years ago. And all of this is focused at just the replacing of all our poor performing circuits, replacing poles and transformers and cables and cross arms. There's a number up here that you probably haven't heard before. I don't believe we've discussed it before, and it's important to help get an idea of just how significant this is. We have some 39,000 individual backlogged job orders on principally our distribution system, electric distribution system, for repairs, replacements that we have not done. And the number's growing, and it's been growing.
What percentage of the total repair orders would that be?
Well, that is our total list of our backlog of unfulfilled repair orders.
Right. I'm just trying to get a sense of how much is backlog versus how much we're keeping up with, if you will.
I would say the normal levels of backlog, like when a crew goes out there and does the temporary repairs, within several days you should come behind them and clean them up and then restore them to a permanent. I would say anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000 would be a normal level.
Okay.
We're at 40,000
Okay.
because of the backlog keeps on building up.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So have we been at when was the last time we were at the 2,000 to 3,000 level? If that's the norm.
Can't remember being, because of,
So it's not really the norm.
it's the way it should be.
It's the ideal.
A lot of times especially when we have rainstorms and things that come, those are the ones that fail first because they're temporarily restored. And whenever we have windstorms or rainstorms, those are the ones that go, and then we have to go back.
So it's double work.
It's double work, and so we can go back, but we've never sustained that level of replacement of infrastructure that will cause us to have less of those failures.
Yeah, but I think what the commissioners getting, we're trying to put some context around this. So in an ideal world, we'd have a backlog of about 2,000 to 3,000 repairs, right? But let's say over the last 10 years, what's been the average backlog? Has it been around 20,000? Or?
I can't say, we can find that out, but it's not less than 20,000. We're always hovering around between 20 to 40,000.
So it's about double what it normally is.
Double.
Well, looking at it from a different angle, what would it take to get through the 39,000 that you currently have?
In terms of money or man hours?
Well, both.
Both.
It's kind of the one side is getting the infrastructure replaced with the right level of replacement cycles. That's one track, but that's not going to take care of the backlog that we have. We have to kind of double up in the first 3 to 5 years of the push that we have to do in order for us to get either additional resources or different ways of operating so we can get the backlog down as we do the replacement and continue on with that thing.
Is there
What-
no, please, you go ahead.
Well, what will the budget that you were putting an additional 95 million into it? What is that going to bring the backlog down to?
That's going to the capital budget that we have here addresses the infrastructure replacement cycle. So it's the poles, the cables, the transformers. That doesn't address the backlog that we have on the temporary repairs and everything else that we have in the system. We're trying to catch up with those as we can.
But the greater reliability will cause
Less of the right. It will the trickling.
It won't grow.
The trickling of the backlog will slow down, but it will not take care of the backlog itself. But we have to figure out another way of handling it.
So is there a correlation between the backlog and outages?
There is in our tie between how much backlog we have and how much we've cleaned up versus the number of outages that we've had, and it's kind of hard to separate the true cause of the outages because as we're doing those, we're doing the infrastructure replacement, so we cannot say what's causing what, but you could see the trends going down as we increase the expenditure on the infrastructure. The number of outages will definitely go on. I think we have a graph that shows that too.
Okay.
In fact, this very next page of this presentation, it gives you
That would be ideal.
it gives you a view, but don't take this as there's a linear relationship between dollars spent and outages, because there are lag time issues associated with it. It's not a perfect science. I mean, the power system has spent an awful lot of time and effort to do prioritization of where do you replace to get the best bang for the buck on we can here. And as you can see, when you follow this, there's two important pieces of information on here. The bottom level here shows the annual expenditures to this program, and we had increasing levels of outages. The top line here is just the numbers of outages per year. So the scale on the left is the dollars. So we're looking at capital and then O&M dollars here. So we're starting at $356 million. We got up to a high of $812 million, and then we cut that back. Actually, I was remembering that wrong. We cut it back by $105 million last year. I was understating what we had cut it back at. And what we've seen is we were able to bring, after a number of years of starting to ramp it up, we're able to start bringing down that number of outages. But it's not a static situation. We have a lot of, you have to take a look back at the time of when we put in our system. We grew like crazy as a city right after World War II. Well, that's now, 65 years old. And things don't last 65 years. So we saw a big growth at that period of time. So we're seeing a significant amount of things getting larger. And
Tell me some things last 65 years. It's good to know.
yes, they do.
Okay.
And I could elaborate upon that, but I won't.
So, I mean, it's almost counterintuitive looking at this chart. If you just correlate it year to year, so the more we spend, the more outages we have.
Well, it's what it is and again, the issue is because it's the wave of the aging of our system. So much of it started getting older at that time, and we're behind it. We're about a decade behind it, in fact, in general. And we caught up, we spent, and we caught up with a fair amount of it. And now that next wave is starting to catch up with us again, and we have to spend more. Our plans are an increasing amount each year to catch up with that. And there is a lag factor on some of this. I don't know if you want to provide a little more color on this, Aaron.
I think the details are kind of counterintuitive because of the lag period, but just like the stock market curve, over the 30-year period or 50, I mean, you see some trending without looking at.
Right.
When you look at the duration and the frequency of our outages 10 years ago, we're double both of those indices.
So you should be looking at a longer period of time.
Longer.
Right.
So that kind of in between we could have some lag time because of weather conditions or infrastructure that we've done in between, kind of gives you a little bit of a sense of where we are. But looking at a 10-year period, we are on both indices, we're double the amount we were 10 years ago.
And that's just going to get worse by virtue of the aging of the system and where that big bubble of growth happened in the 40s and early 50s.
But to Commissioner Moss's point, there's no extra money in the budget focused on reducing the backlog.
Not specifically to reducing the backlog. The only issue is, and going back to what Aram indicated, by virtue of, as we start ramping up this replacement program, we will at the same time be working off some of the things that would otherwise be contributing to the additional jobs by replacing some of the system. But
One area that we want to concentrate moving forward is the inspection group that we have, that we want to beef up that capabilities of knowing what we don't know. And that area, I mean, the 40,000 is the stuff what we know today. There are a lot of things that we should be doing to figure out the scope of what else we need to do. That area we've been pushing on the capital side, trying to get ahead of the curve on that side, and we have to do it on both fronts going forward. That we haven't laid out the plan.
Okay.
And then another big area. This is a part of our program that part indeed meets again some government mandates, some regulated mandates, but also is aligned with a lot of what we heard from our customers last summer. Last summer, and it's on page 12 on here. Last summer, we had 35 some public meetings on our rate process and our programs at that point, and asked for some input on investments and what we call strategic investments. And consistently, the one that got very high desire in us investing more in is giving our customers more options for co-investing with us in energy efficiency, options in co-investing with us in putting solar photovoltaic on their home or business roofs. And this program addresses both of those, and particularly in the energy efficiency area. It says a 26% increase. It's actually over a 30% increase over year in our energy efficiency budget, which is still, and you'll recall a few meetings back, we had presented to you an energy efficiency potential study, multi-year on what we would be doing, and we have a requirement by the state by 2020 to get to a 10% reduction in energy by 2020, and we adopted a plan that's about 8.5% instead of 10%, and that's recognizing that we have to ramp up. So we're not there, and this plan does not get us to a 2020 10% reduction in energy efficiency, but it's ramping to get there, in part because we literally have to rebuild our programs. Energy efficiency has been something that when we haven't had rates, it's been one of the things that's been cut. And our customers spoke pretty loud and clearly to us last summer that said, it's important to us, we want to save on our bills, we want to contribute to energy savings, we'll invest if you invest. And so that's what part of this program is about. We also propose, as part of our customer solar program, both the solar incentive program and the commencement, and that's required. The solar incentive program, the SIP, is required under Senate Bill 1 a number of years back. Tells how much we have to invest each year in doing that. And the solar feed-in tariff is required by SB 32, and we are going to be, in fact, next month, finally rolling that out and requesting your formal approval to have that go forward as well. And the budget dollars are in here for that. With that, if there are any other questions right now, and then let me turn it over to Phil to talk about more of some of the cost components and the rate and the rate impacts, approximate impacts for fiscal year 12-13.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Nichols talked about the budget in terms of the major programs that we're going to be investing in over the coming years. This is an alternative view of the budget that just shows the major expense types. And as you look at this, you'll see the largest components of our spending are in the area of fuel and purchase power, which are about 40% of our overall budget. Interestingly enough, a lot of people think with all the staff that we have that labor costs would be a sizable portion of our budget. And it's not insignificant, but it's not as large as you might think. The salaries and benefits components, only about a quarter of the overall revenue requirement, kind of shown in the top there. The money we spend on capital is recovered through the depreciation component, which is about 14% over on the left-hand side. And you'll note the investment in energy efficiency is a very small portion of the overall revenue requirement, smaller than you might have seen in past years. And that's kind of counterintuitive because we're actually spending more on that program, but it's the way it's recovered year by year. Previously, we were considering that an O&M expense, and now we are capitalizing that and spreading those costs over time. So it actually turns out to be a smaller portion of the budget. So as Mr. Nichols indicated...
Can I go back?
Sure.
What does net income refer to, the 2%?
Every year we have to set rates to meet certain financial criteria. We have to have a minimum debt service coverage level. We have to have a minimum amount of net income in order to generate funds to make the city transfer, to fund our capital program, et cetera. So each year we set net income to be a minimum of $50 million. And that's what that constitutes. And that's after the city transfer.
And just as a clarifying point, after we've had that net income is then becomes a portion of a cash contribution to next year's capital program. So that's a portion of what we're able to spend, so we don't have to borrow debt for all of that.
Why do you call it net income? It seems
it's an accounting term. Yeah. It's an obligatory accounting term.
It's actually kind of used loosely here for a not-for-profit entity. It's actually called a change in net assets.
Right.
But
because at the end of the day, our only shareholders are our customers, and that money goes back into the system to be applied to costs of the next year. And it's the financial metric that we need to have that gives comfort to the fact that we have a slight margin over our costs, so that we maintain a good credit rating.
So as Mr. Nichols indicated, the additional investments we'll be making in those areas will require an adjustment in rates, and it has been a while since we've had either a base rate or an ECAF adjustment. It will have been over 2 years prior to an adjustment in the ECAF, and over 3 years for an adjustment in base rates. So these increases are sorely needed. This slide shows the impact of a rate change on a typical residential customer, which we consider is one that uses about 500 kilowatt hours per month. Now, as indicated, the rate would not increase at the start of the fiscal year. It will start on October 1st. And it's delayed because of the need for us to present the rate case to the ratepayer advocate and kind of work back all the process going to council and so forth. So October 1st is the earliest the rate could increase. So we've actually presented the impact of the rate increase in 2 different ways. One is just saying if you look at those 9 months from October to June in this upcoming fiscal year and compare it to the previous 9 months of the current fiscal year, if you look at it that way, the average residential customer is going to pay about 4.1% more than they did last year. If you look at it on a full year basis, you actually get a smaller number. Then it's about 3.1%, because if you look at all of next year versus all of this year, the fact that the rate didn't increase on October 1st gives you a smaller percentage. You also notice over on the right that we also show the change in the system average rate, and that is a slightly higher percentage. And again, because we have various customer classes, they may see slightly different rate increases depending on their consumption levels. And we'll be presenting all of that information in more detail in upcoming sessions. But if in terms of the actual dollar amount, the change in the average monthly bill on a full year basis would be about $2 a month, and if you just look at the 9 months, it would be about $2.71 per month. And one other thing it's worth noting is, again, because it will start on October 1st, customers are not likely to see an increase from September to October, because during the summer we have the higher rates in effect, and people are using more energy, so they're not likely to see this increase when they just look at their bills from month to month.
And the rate that you're talking about, are you just talking about an increase in base rate, or are you also talking about an increase in ECAF?
This would be both. So this includes both a base rate and ECAF and the reliability cost adjustment factor as well.
I see. And what are you proposing on that? I don't know if we have that, the ECAF.
It's not shown in this presentation, but the breakout, if you're just looking at that 4.6% system average rate, about 3.3% is related to the base. The ECAF is 0.8%, and the reliability cost adjustment is 0.6%.
And Commissioner, just so we are planning at present, working together to have for you at the next board meeting, the next regular board meeting next week, a discussion of more detail of our rates and drilling into that, not just this year, but a subsequent year as well on that. And we'll be able to provide you a little bit more robust discussion of some of that. So I'd like to go back, and now we've kind of covered at a high level what we're looking at. Those are the things that are driving the budget. Those are the things that are inherent rate increases associated with those budget items that we talked about, again, just for fiscal year 12-13 on the power side. Water side has a similar situation in terms of a number of programs that drive our costs. And again, these are our local water supply program. That is our efforts that, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but our efforts that we've talked many times about to reduce our reliance on imported water, long-term investments that we have to do year after year to get there. We'll talk a bit about the other major program is our safe drinking water program. Of course, we took a very significant action by this board in December that was confirmed by City Council in January on cost towards about half of that program. We'll talk about that a little bit more. And then in a similar fashion as we...
Just one second. I'm going to go back and make sure. Can you go back to page 13 where the allocation of power costs? I want to understand I'll make sure I do understand. Most of these costs really are pure pass-throughs to the ratepayer. That is, we don't have a lot of discretion with respect to these costs, right? I mean, the labor costs and benefits are what they are by contract for the most part. I guess there's some flexibility in terms of some employees. But
Right.
for the most part, that's a pass-through.
Correct.
The city transfer is statutory,
Right?
right? I guess we have some flexibility on energy efficiency.
Although we have legal mandates that we're not quite meeting yet, and we're trying to ramp up to meet.
So even that's
right.
somewhat in,
Right.
it's a pass-through. The fuel and purchase power costs, those are costs that we have. We pass them through.
Correct.
Perhaps do a better job in terms of what we pay for the fuel or the power.
And actually, we're not fully passing it through because aren't we under on the ECAF?
We are under collecting on those costs right now.
Okay, so even though we're not fully passing the cost through.
North of $100 million cumulatively right now that we have not collected.
The interest expense is kind of what it is, depending on our rating.
Right.
And then lastly, I guess capital depreciation is one area where we have some flexibility, but it ties into our overall operation.
That's predicated on investments that we have made in the past in power generation and our distribution system and some of this power reliability and other programs that we've invested in just in replacing. There is not a significant amount of degrees of freedom here in what we do.
Thank you.
Right. So the letter item is similar to what we've had in the power supply area. In our power reliability program, we have, of course, the same issue with our aging water infrastructure, which we see a little bit more vividly when we see breaks in pipes in the streets that the media, of course, finds opportunities to bring to our attention. We have aging pipelines, and repairing that is something that we have been underfunding. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So getting to each of these a little bit, drilling down a little bit more into each of these areas, our local water supply program is the program that we undertake to wean ourselves off of imported water and reduce exactly the circumstance that this year is just facing us is kind of a classic extreme circumstance where we've gone from a really wet year last year, as we talked about at the outset of this meeting, to a very dry year this year, and the swing between those is the water that we get out of the eastern Sierras, principally, local rainfall that reduces the amount that our customers need to use water for at least irrigation purposes, and then with the swing with that is today we picked that up with buying from Metropolitan Water District to bring water from either out of the Colorado River or down through the State Water Project that takes water out of north of the Delta.
And do you have a general sense of the relative cost of water we get from our local water supply program versus water we purchase from MWD? Is there, if you looked at over the last 5 years, kind of what are the relative costs?
You mean through compared to projects like the water recycling and those kind of things? It's pretty dependent on the type of project, because like on water recycling, we have projects that come in pretty much underneath the MET rate right now for a older project that's been done, and it's a simple project without a lot of pipe. Something that has a lot of purple pipe for a modest amount of delivery, or that involves some kind of treatment, it's going to be higher. So it ranges all over the place. We did do a study, though, recently where we looked at water recycling, conservation, stormwater capture, kind of a forward look to see now, comparing the cost. If we just didn't do those projects and we bought Met Water instead, what would the annual cost be for those, and then what would it cost to build these projects? What we found in most cases, probably with the exception of water conservation, there's some of those that have a pretty good payback right out of the gate. A lot of these involve some upfront investments that, when you look at it on a per acre foot basis, it might be a little bit more than what would cost us to buy the water from Met. And that might go for the next 5 to 10 years, but after that, the lines cross, because Met costs are expected to just increase, 5% a year ad infinitum conservatively. That assumes the water, and that assumes the water is available. So there is a crossing point on these things and a payback period, and it's kind of the nature of the water business. You know, it's like when we built the LA Aqueduct, or they built the Colorado River Aqueduct, they didn't pencil out on the day they were sold because there was nobody to buy all the water. But you know, now we're very grateful that we have those things in place. So we're kind of looking at these investments the same way, as that we need to make these investments now, and they will pay back for our customers many years into the future.
So what about the relative cost of water from the LA Aqueduct versus MWD?
For the LA Aqueduct, that's going to be, well, it depends on whether you count the cost of Owens Lake dust in there. You know, if you don't count the cost of the Owens Lake dust mitigation project, it's by far our cheapest source of water that we have out there. The Owens Lake dust kind of skewed the whole thing, but that's a very low cost of water. The water that we can still pump from our groundwater basin in the San Fernando Basin and in the areas that have not yet become contaminated is also a very low cost of water. You're looking at maybe $100 or $200 an acre foot on those kind of supplies, compared to, you know, nets up to $800 an acre.
And if you factor in Owens mitigation?
On the LA Aqueduct supplies, it's almost as much as the net cost when you're looking at it over time. Okay. And the reason I kind of hesitated, I've got a graph in my mind that shows on a year-to-year basis, and it's always dangerous to do those on a year-to-year basis because you're dividing by how much water is delivered. So you have a really good year, it makes your unit costs look really good. Right. You have a low yield year, then your unit cost jumps up. But kind of on the average, they're getting kind of comparable, and that's why we're very concerned about that Owens Lake dust cost.
How much more do you think we'll be spending on purchasing that water this year than we did last year, in terms of real dollars?
Well, it does depend still on where the winter ends up, but it's on the order of 175 million, isn't it? More? Am I remembering that number right, Jim?
This year compared to last year?
Yeah, next year versus this year. So I think just to get us up to an average water year, you know, we had a really good water year this year. If we assume next year's average, you're looking at about a $75 million difference.
Right.
Now, if you consider,
depending on where we are, it's possible that number could double.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
We're hopeful not. I'm not sure we had the March miracle. We're hoping for an April amen. In terms of more snowpack. But as we deal with so trying to shield ourselves from that wild swing in the future, and as Jim indicated, we're talking about assuming that water is available from the Colorado River and from the Delta. You don't have to remember back very many years when the trend of availability from both of those sources was year after year, drought after drought, at levels that were really alarming. But just assuming that it's available, still just trying to cut back on our reliance on that from a cost perspective. These are the types of programs that are doing this. The water recycling program, we're looking at a $33 million increase this year, and that's not a huge growth from where we at all, and it's not where we want to be. It's starting to recover from what we had dipped down from because of some of our deferred projects. Our water conservation program, another $14 million this year. Again, we'd like to do more than that. Part of that is a ramp up because we have to get programs ramped up, and it takes a while to get those ramped up. Our stormwater capture, where we take weekends like we just last 2 weekends that we had, where the LA River was taking water out to the sea, with programs that we have done, some of which, more of which we want to do, to capture that stormwater, put it into the San Fernando Valley, and to have it percolate into the aquifer so we can pump it out at a later point in time. About an $8 million increase next year on that. The problem is we've had so many discussions on the amount of water that we can pump from groundwater to which we have rights that's in that San Fernando Valley aquifer today is being compromised more and more each year from the spreading plume of contamination from industrial pollution that happened back there in the middle of the last century. And so we have a program that another $13 million that's just the start of trying to ramp up reducing that and stemming the tide back on that so that we not only can get the groundwater that we have rights to that's there today, but then so we make certain that it makes economic and financial sense to capture stormwater, to put it in there, and in the future, put recycled water into that groundwater aquifer and not be contaminating it so that we can't use it. Each of these are a number of different programs that we move forward this year, and they are the start of a ramp up to some multi-year programs to reduce our reliance on imported water. And we talked a lot last fall, at the end of the calendar year, about our safe drinking water program. I'm not going to repeat that because I know we had some very good discussions about that. It was about a $1.1 billion program over multiple years, and with the 35-cent water quality improvement factor increase that this board approved and council ratified here in January, we've taken care of about half of that. And but there will be more to come. No more this year. It's taken care of us through all of this year, and it takes care of the projects that we have listed up here on the board. And I know we've discussed that at some length in the past. Our water system reliability is something that we talked a lot about last summer. I know before this board we've talked about on our pipe replacement. Well, it's not just pipes. That's kind of the most visible aspect of when things break. We have an overall increase of about $28 million between capital and O&M. This gets us to about 120,000 feet in this next year of replacement. That's still, if you take, given the aging of our pipes and the amount of pipes we have out there, that's still a 320-year replacement rate. That is, we're replacing our pipes at the rate of every 320 years, and they don't last that long. And it's not where we want to be. This is definitely below levels that we recommend. We are looking to ramp up. We literally need to hire and train some additional crews to be able to do this work and expand it. We cut back. We didn't just slow down. I mean, we didn't just maintain the low level that we were at. We actually cut back last year as part of our rate issues. But this gets us back ramping up, and we'll be talking more next week about how we want to ramp that up in subsequent fiscal years.
I think we talked about this at least once before. What's a reasonable or an ideal replacement cycle?
Well, I'll let Jim
What
respond
should
to
be the
that.
goal? I know it's going to take time for us to get there.
Yeah, I mean, you look at an asset that lasts 100 years. You know, you ought to be on a 100-year replacement cycle. I mean,
Okay.
Now there's highs and lows in that because, like Ron was saying, certain periods of history we added a whole lot of infrastructure at once, so not everything's aging at a linear rate. I think some of the we can't take advantage of newer technology and better materials. The ductile iron pipe that we're installing now, that's properly wrapped and insulated, and the kind of backfill we're using are vastly superior to the cast iron pipe that was put in the ground many times with no cement mortar coating and corrosive soil right against the pipe. So we expect that we'll do better than 100 years old, and we have some cast iron that's 100. So, you know, one of the things that we're trying to do is get away from just kind of generalizing like that and really looking into specific categories of infrastructure and replacing what does it take. But, you know, on the grand scheme of things, we should probably be looking at something around 150 to 200 year replacement cycle, and then we can kind of see how we're going from there and fine tune it. We're so far away from that right now. If I could get to a 200 year replacement cycle, that would be, I think, fantastic, and we would be in great shape. One of the things that we're looking at in the water system is a lot like Aram. In the 1920s, the city acquired and built a whole lot of, they had a kind of a pre-World War II building boom then also, and so there's a vast amount of infrastructure that's reaching that century mark right now, and that's somewhat disturbing to us right now, so we're kind of really focusing on that.
Now, does the replacement cycle, the pipeline that we're measuring, is that within the city proper, or is that also looking at stuff related to the LA Aqueduct?
We've got separate asset management and asset characterization for the LA Aqueduct because it's kind of unique types of construction. And, you know, I think I've talked to you before about the program we have where we go in there every year and rehab a certain number of miles of LA Aqueduct. and then we're looking at the steel pipeline sections of that. So we're looking at that kind of as a separate type project. It's not like this where it's a massive commodity type asset replacement.
But all in, these are, these programs that we just talked about are programs that you're going to hear us talking about, for the years to come on things. These are the drivers and will continue to be the key drivers of our budget, our budget requirements, and our deliberations over what rates we need in order to be able to pay for these things. Let me turn it back over to Phil now to kind of go over the same sort of thing in terms of the allocation of our water costs and what are the rate implications here, because it's a bit of a different picture, certainly for fiscal year 12-13 as compared to power when we get to the rate implications.
Yeah, so as Ron just said, it does differ from power in a few notable ways, and we're also going to see some sizable variation here year by year because of the highly variable purchased water component. But this is what we'd be looking at next year if we have a normal water year. As we have discussed, we could very well find purchased water taking up a more sizable component than even 20%. But like the power system, the salaries and benefit component is not the major driver of our costs. It's only about a quarter of the overall budget. And purchased water is the largest single component, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. One notable difference here between what you saw in power and what we have here in water is net income is a more sizable component. And we inquired into the reasons for that, and this really has to do with the way the conservation and reclamation capital expenditures that we're going to be making, how those are recovered. The current ordinance calls for those to be funded by cash rather than with bonds. So we're having to collect that cash up front directly from the customers to fund those programs. So that's what's causing this higher net income percentage than what you saw in the power system.
So if I understand you correctly, if we want to spend, say, $10 million on water conservation tasks, we can't go out and finance that? We have to actually pay it through revenue?
That's the gist of it. That's the way the current ordinance.
Vast majority of it, yes.
Yeah.
Does that make sense financially?
That's something we're going to take a look at. We're going to be looking at restructuring the water rates, and that would be one of the items we'd look at changing. But as it's written right now, that's...
Because I seem to recall that we financed, last year, we decided to finance some of the energy
Correct.
Programs, and that made a lot of sense on a fiscal basis.
And indeed, many of the types of things that we would be doing in the water system would also make sense. Not all of them. Some of them truly are short enough term items that they likely may not be treated as a capital item. But there are several items that are very long-lived that could, and we believe should. We have ordinance issues that we need to deal with, and we will be talking about those here in subsequent consideration of our rates, but it's one of those things that takes a little bit longer time to go through, make those adjustments. Once you start looking at some of those issues, there's some other things that you need to take a look at other ways of cost allocation matters as well, and anticipate that we'll have some discussions with that. I anticipate we'll likely be discussing that and reviewing some of that with the ratepayer advocate as well as we look at things in more detail.
So if we're required to use cash for certain projects, I assume that drives up the borrowing cost for other projects, which is why our interest expense is higher on the water side than on the power side?
Well,
It's 14% here, as I recall, it's 4%.
And I think that goes to Ron's earlier point, that that's just based on decisions that are made earlier, how much of our capital program was funded through bonds versus cash.
Well, and there's another element here, because it's 14% of the whole pie, okay?
Yeah.
And when you're in a power system, power supply fuel and purchase power is a bigger piece than just purchase water here. So as a result, all in, we have a lot of other costs out there that are kind of commodity, fuel, operating types, non-labor operating types of costs that are much larger, and as a result, while power is also a capital-intensive program, fuel costs are so big.
So it's 4% of $3 billion versus 14% of $1 billion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
So it's making direct comparisons is difficult on it, because they are very different types of systems. Water is more capital-oriented, and while we do, if you were to take in a year where we have significant purchases of water from MWD, and that purchased water number gets much bigger, your interest expense number is going to probably might even drop down to as low as single-digit percentage.
And it's also worth noting that there's really no standard for what you would expect to see from one utility to the next. You really see very different breakouts depending on the nature of their generation or in the water system, where they're getting their water from. Okay, so like we did in power, we show a chart here that shows for a typical residential customer what their anticipated bill increase would be. And we've used a slightly different comparison here than we did with power, because for power we didn't have any rate changes in the current fiscal year. For water, we already have approved the water quality adjustment factor. So we wanted to isolate the impact of the changes on top of that water quality adjustment that's already been approved. So the way we did the comparison is we looked at the fourth quarter of this fiscal year and compared next year to that. And we said, what's changing? And it's these other pass-throughs for local water supply, about 12 cents increase, and a lot of that's offset by other pass-throughs that are going down. And overall, the rates would be going up about 1.1% from this last quarter of the current fiscal year. And that equates to about 47 cents a month for the typical residential customer. And you can see at the bottom of the slide their bill would increase from $42.77 up to $43.24. Now there's one notable component that's not discussed on this slide, which is purchased water. We don't yet have a good forecast for what we're going to spend next year for purchased water. We're not through with the precipitation season. On May 1st, we'll get our final estimate that will allow us to really get a good handle around what we're going to be spending on purchased water. But as General Manager has mentioned, we are looking at spending quite a bit more in the upcoming year than we have in the past. And this is not terribly surprising. The amount we have to spend on purchased water does vary greatly from year to year, and that's illustrated in this chart. As you can see, we're looking at about over a 20-year period here, and we're showing the portion of the customer bill that's going to purchase water. And it's ranged anywhere from about 10 cents per 100 cubic feet all the way up to over $1.25. Next year is likely to be a year where we're going to be spending a fair amount more on purchased water. And if you look at just the volume of purchases that we make for Metropolitan Water District, the range is quite significant. It's been as little as 67,000 acre-feet up to 440,000 acre-feet. And you also notice the overall trend here is more purchased water over time as the amount we've been able to import from Owens Valley has decreased.
Well, if we go back to your, I guess it's slide 22, instead of basing the percentage change from the fourth quarter of last year after we did the water quality increase, what if we had gone to the second quarter of last year to see what the cumulative effect of what we did so far plus what we're proposing? Do you have those numbers?
Yeah, if you want to look at, say, all of last year, or all of the current year to all of the upcoming year, and again excluding purchased water, then you would be looking at about a 4.9% increase.
Thank you.
And as Mr. Nichols has indicated, this is really the problem that we're facing, illustrated on this chart. There's a lot of interesting lines here. A typical year is illustrated by the black dotted line. That's the amount of precipitation we would get. Kind of shows cumulatively month by month what we'd be expecting to see. And the two problems that we have are the red line is what we're seeing this season. It's well below what we'd see in a typical water year. And it's especially significant compared to what we are seeing in the current year, which is illustrated by the blue line. So in terms of the impact to our customers, we're going from a particularly good year to what's likely to be near a record poor year. And that will cause a wide swing in the amount of purchased water that we're going to have to procure. Well, the good news is the water season is not entirely over, so we could see some improvement, but it's not likely, in fact, nearly impossible that we're going to, through the remainder of the season, get anywhere close to even an average year.
So that kind of covers the key things that are driving our costs, main items in our budget, and explains a lot of what are the drivers that affect these rate adjustments that we'll be talking more about here in the coming weeks and months. But I want to leave a point with you that that this is not a particularly robust and full budget by any means. There are a number of things. This is a budget that we're proposing. I wouldn't say it's a budget that, given our druthers, we would be recommending, but we are acknowledging where we are in terms of the economy, where it is, trying to balance near-term rates versus long-term investment requirements, things that we are correcting, if you will, or resolving a number of the problems that we talked about when we presented a zero-rate increase budget back in January, but by no means all of them. Our power reliability program, our water infrastructure replacement program are still not being funded at levels that we would say these are what we'd recommend to spend. This is we're settling for a level that is a compromise. It's a compromise that puts us at a threat of reduced reliability in both systems. It's at a level that we think is starting to go better the right direction, but not as much as we would like to be able to do. Our energy efficiency program, and this is something we're going to be talking about more, our energy efficiency program has been the swing item of our budget for the last 2 or 3 years. When we don't get a rate increase, we cut back our energy efficiency program. It's the wrong thing to do. It's not in accordance with the law, although there aren't currently penalties for not doing it. That could change. It's the wrong signal to our customers who would like to know what's the consistency. Is DWP going to be out there a couple of years out in the future? So we want to try to maintain, we'll be talking more about that, maintain a glide path up, increasing path. But these levels are not the levels where we would like to be, but it's getting the right direction. We have a number of, as we talked about, critical systems that just we're not catching up with where they should be. The facilities are past their service life, and we're not catching up with where they ought to be. We have things like, and this becomes painful every time we put together a budget for this board and the council and our customers. Every time we do a rate adjustment, we have an antiquated financial system. It's painful. It's not nimble. And to try to change things, I know this board and the commissioners get a bit frustrated at times. Well, why can't we quickly turn around and give you another scenario on something? It's because we have an antiquated system that is very difficult to move, and very similar to the same sort of problems we have with our customer information system, and we're not funding anything on that as part of this. So, these are it's a bare bone budget. It's something that we're hopeful we'll be able to make year-over-year improvements on and still balance something that doesn't create undue rate pressure to our customers, and to maintain, most importantly, both on the water and on the power side, we do enjoy a rate advantage over other California utilities, and we want to maintain that rate advantage, but we have to recognize the realities of the things that we have in our budget.
Ron, does this budget give you enough money to comply with whatever federal mandates and regulations are out there as of today?
It does. It does. The two most stringent or specific ones, I should say, that effect is on the water side. It's the safe drinking water requirement. Even though it's enforced by the California Department of Public Health, it is federal EPA standards. So it does allow us to comply with that. We will be making more investments as we go forward past this fiscal year. On the federal side, we have certain requirements with respect to National Electric Reliability Council standards that we have to do. We're meeting those, although we're on the ragged edge of making certain that we're investing where we need to be and aren't creating future problems for ourselves. Again, while the South Coast Air Quality Management District and the Air Resources Board enforces federally established air standards in NOx and SOx, they are federal standards, and we are meeting requirements, and some of the cost elements in here are part of meeting that. So we are meeting those requirements, but we're effectively going back to what President Sales indicated. The vast majority of what we're talking about here is meeting mandated minimum levels of investment to meet these regulated requirements.
Mr. Moss?
Thank you, Ron. This is, certainly a better budget than the zero rate increase case that you presented to us earlier, because that was really troubling. But I have to admit, I'm still troubled for many of the reasons that you just expressed a few moments ago about how the remaining issues are not fully addressed. The reliability issues, I think we're just, skating on thin ice on those. I don't think we're really digging into the levels that I think our ratepayers and customers would like us to really do in terms of reliability. So I guess the question I really have is, what happened to the notion of a multi-year budget where we could take a real good whack at all these large items that are hanging over us and do it in a way that we can spread out the impact onto the ratepayers, especially in our business community, where we don't create rate increases that begin to stifle economic development in town?
Well, it's a good question, and one of the things that we're seeking to do here is to be able to get enough runway, if you will, to make some plans for this year and next year while we lay out for this board a more detailed 5-year financial plan. And so you'll get a better feel, and we'll be talking more about this literally, I think, believe next week, to give you a better feel for, and you'll see these same programs. What do these programs mean in subsequent years? We obviously know a lot more about what our costs are on each of these programs this year and next than we do years 3, 4, and 5. So we're comfortable that we can give you very solid numbers and recommendations for levels that, again, are compromises between customer rate effects and the investments we need to make. And then lay out for you beyond that a range of what those costs would be and the programs and the consequences associated with that. And then through that process, be able to then look ahead at maybe a 3-year process beyond that. And frankly, on top of that, we have a new reviewing party here. We have a ratepayer advocate, and we felt this is kind of a compromise approach. I would rather have a multiple-year approach that gives us and our customers a better view of the long term on things so that we can plan more. But by the same token, we have an independent reviewing party that needs to play catch-up, to be blunt, in terms of getting up to speed on what our costs are, getting more familiar with some of these challenges that we're facing, so that they have some of the background that you as a commission have had in dealing with this over a number of years. And so we can then not have a really compacted time frame for reviewing a multi-year budget and a multi-year rate plan. So that's kind of it's a compromise approach.
No, and I appreciate that. The assumption I'm operating under is that from a business planning standpoint, going to a longer multi-year plan will help to be more efficient and to make, to actually depoliticize the process to a large extent, because I think, quite frankly, the department has not been well served by how things have gone in the past, say, 5 years.
Well, I would agree. It makes both planning planning difficult. It makes commitments on hiring and training and long-term contracting and buy versus build and all types of other decisions that become long-term types of commitments that are made on too short of a time frame for decision making. So I would agree with you on that.
Thank you. Mr. President, I have some specific questions that I'd like to ask, but I don't want to take up, or dominate the microphone.
You can ask them offline, or you can ask them now.
Well, let me throw them out now. I mean, firstly, going to Owens Valley, what is the amount in this budget that's reflective of Owens Valley mitigation method? Is it around $100 million, or is it more than that?
So you're talking about incremental?
No, I mean
All
in this next year. What are
Because-
we budgeting for Owens Valley mitigation?
Because the reason I asked incremental versus all in is because clearly a portion of what we have done has been capitalized. We've spent $1 billion, some of which is replacement water, some of which is capital contributions.
Oh, that's in interest cost now, right?
Then interest and in allocation, annual amortization of
Right.
of
Yeah.
capital.
No, I'm talking about just new money.
New
Yeah.
obligations
Yeah.
on that. I don't have my fingers on those numbers right now. Greg, I don't know if you have those at your fingertips.
For regulatory compliance for Owens Valley for capital, for fiscal year 12-13, we have $104 million.
Yeah. So I thought it was about $100 million.
Yes.
Okay. How much of the?
But there's O&M costs, incremental O&M costs on
Yes.
top of that as well.
I'll give you those. The O&M costs are $31 million for 12-13, and it goes up to $38 million in 16-17. So about $1 million or $2 million a year goes up.
Okay. And then the budget, you broke out water, you broke out power. You didn't assign for joint operation. How does that get factored into the budget?
It's allocated between them. It differs a little bit between capital and O&M, but generally it's about 30% water and 70% of joint is in power. We have part of our budget process has been paring back some of those costs because they get shared between the two systems, and that's in things with respect to levels of replacing attrition of staff, to vehicle expenditures, to information technology expenditures, computers, and things of that sort that we've been holding a line on as well.
Okay. And has anyone done a study looking at the amount of claims, because you have some line items in both the power and the water budget for claims and damages, I think it's referred to.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, has anyone looked at, in terms of the reliability programs, if you put more money in the reliability programs, can you assume that you'll be spending less money on claims and damages? Because it seems that if you could shift the costs, that would be well spent, even though we can't always control claims and damages. But I just wonder if someone's actually looked at that issue.
We've looked at it. We've looked at it a little bit more on the water side than we have on the power side, because you typically have pretty obvious types of property damage problems that we have with some of our breakage in our systems when we, the Coldwater Canyon break being probably the poster child event of that.
Well, we're up about $6-7 million in claims on that.
Beyond that, I believe. But it's at the end of the day to say, do we have? Is there an allocated cost associated with our budget specifically by putting incrementally this much more in pipe replacement? Can we assume this much less in claims? I just don't think it's that good of a science. Is there probably a trend correlation with that? Certainly there is. It's the type of thing where might we cut that in half by a few years out? Yeah, we might. So, but we're talking, maybe things that might be in the low single digits $1 million per year of reduced claims by virtue of some of the investments that we do.
And Commissioner, if I might add, what we've been doing is looking actually a little bit even more targeted on that and trying to differentiate certain kinds of claims, and the legal department had brought it to my attention that we had a kind of a somewhat of a rash of a certain type of claim, and that by putting a inspection program in place for a pretty nominal additional amount of money, we should be able to take a big bite out of that particular kind of claim. So we are making that investment, adding some staff to inspect this certain kind of infrastructure to prevent those type of claims in the future. So we are looking at that, but it's more of kind of on a focus basis than
That's encouraging.
across the thing.
Yeah. And we sort of touched a little bit upon this, but I want to mention climate change. And in terms of, figuring on allocation, purchase water versus LA aqueduct water, we're seeing a, potential drought year unfolding right now. And it would seem that we could be looking at some long-term trends in terms of climate change. And are we beginning to factor and protect and invest in protective measures now for that in the future?
Well, obviously, that affects more on the water side than it does the power side, although rising temperatures within our service territory will put higher demands, summer peak demands on power as well. But on the water system, we talked about the things that we're doing to try to reduce our reliance on imported water. Long-term, the types of programs that we're talking about help provide, certainly by water conservation investments, certainly help mitigate against any types of reductions in availability of water, be it Owens Valley or purchases from MWD. So anything that we're doing in our local water supply program, on recycled programs, on water conservation, on cleaning up our groundwater, because that is kind of an item that year to year gives you a little bit of buffer. All of those things will help us better position ourselves to deal with climate change, to the effect that in the future reduces our imported water availability.
Okay. Are we doing enough?
Frankly, I think we should be doing more on that. We'd like to be doing more on that. We're dealing the issue we'd like to be doing more than we're doing right now, simply because of if we weren't facing a climate change issue about which there's still a fair amount of debate as to when it's going to hit and how it hits and what's the cycles associated with that. We would like to be able to do more than we're doing in our local water supply program to the extent that we gain more and more insight with respect to what might be the true risks of climate change. We would like to be doing even more on that. But going back to what Jim McDaniel explained, right now we're at levels that we're making investments that are a bit higher than what MWD purchases are right now in order to save more money in the long term. And we get some level of pushback on the rate effects on doing that. To do more of that, we would have to be a little bit higher yet in the near term. It's a judgment call. Personally, I would like to see us doing a bit more on that, and I would welcome further discussion about that among our customers and stakeholders and this commission as we look at that on a multi-year basis. And it's one of the types of things, going back to your earlier question, if we're looking on a multi-year, say a 5-year basis, start looking at if we invested a bit more year and started growing that at a little bit higher rate than we're doing right now, what would be the effects of that? Those are the types of things, and that's the type of dialogue we're expecting to get into.
Good. And one final question. President Sales pointed out that a lot of what is generating our expenditures are satisfying state and federal legal mandates. Do you see any other mandates coming down the pike, from a legislative standpoint, that we need to be thinking about now? We've had the ones through cooling, we've had the water quality, we've had renewable standards. What else is out there?
Well, if I had a full crystal ball on that, I may not be in this position.
You'd be at the track right now.
I might be elsewhere, but in all seriousness, we do monitor that, and we are trying to, modestly increase our resources to track these issues, because there are many issues at the federal and the state level, and all of those things that you talked about, and quite candidly. I have no expectation that between now and 2020 the mandated level of renewable energy requirements will stay the same. I anticipate that there will be upward pressure on that. As costs of renewable energy come down, it might make a lot of sense for that to happen. We're seeing the cost of solar plummeting right now, and it's been a good thing. But the point is, our flexibility of choosing how much more we might want to do based on costs may not necessarily, be a choice. It may be additional regulation. We track these items. We're trying to do a good job of trying to provide just information, just unbiased information to legislators about what are the implications of some of the things that have happened and they have legislated on, so they know what the costs are. And as these things go forward, so that we're better able to dialogue with them and saying, if we make some increased requirements, here's what a range of the costs might be, so that the decisions can be made with better information for all of us when we do that.
Thank you.
Can I just add 2 cents to that, maybe some more specifics? One of the things that was being bounced around last year that may continue to be bounced around this year is a distributed generation goal. So the governor's looking at 12,000 megawatts for the state, and our share is almost always 10% of that because that's our pro rata share of the load. What was discussed at the beginning of this budget presentation that I want to underscore is we had a lot of uncertainty with federal, state, and local regulations, and we got a lot of certainty last year. We had multi-year promulgation packages going through that were closed out on the power system, so there's actually an ability to plan. We had the once-through cooling regulations that were adopted, and a couple weeks ago, actually. The vote was last year, but the final adoption, so we have a schedule that's in a regulation that's for the department. We also have the RPS that was adopted last year, and then AB 32 cap and trade was negotiated in October. So we're living with a few months of certainty with what the AB 32 regulations and related costs for this department, specifically for this department, will be. But what may change, and what we've talked about privately as a team, is we have a lot of new statutes. They've smoothed out through the promulgation process in the last 6 months, but those regulations are going to have to be managed, and the interpretation of those state laws and how it impacts this department and the resulting investments to keep pace with that will have to be managed continuously. So much of the shift for mandates has gone from the state legislature to the various regulatory bodies. I don't think we're going to see a lot of big changes in statutes. I think we're going to see it coming out of the agencies.
Commissioner Howland?
Move approval of item 1.
We do have some speaker cards.
Yes.
Speaker?
Okay, please limit your comments to 2 minutes. The first speaker is Garrett Ruiz.
Yes. Welcome. Thanks so much, Commissioners, DWP staff, members of the public, for allowing us to speak. My name is Garrett Ruiz. I'm representing the Green LA Coalition. We represent about 60 different environmental organizations who are members of the coalition, and several members of our Urban Ecosystems group have been watching water rates over the last year, including Heal the Bay, Hollywood Beautification Team, Food and Water Watch, the Desal Response Group, Generation Water, Environment Now, and Tree People. On behalf of these groups and the environmental community, we'd like to emphasize our support for the development of local water resources. Currently budgeted at $138 million in the preliminary budget, but we'd like to see this increased for a number of, actually, the reasons that Commissioner Moss brought up in terms of protecting ourselves in the long term from climate change and from rising rates. Currently, the City of LA imports between 85 and 89% of our water, and the price of that imported water is increasing and becoming less stable. DWP must invest in local water projects now to keep water prices down in the coming decades by reducing overall demand and developing local sources of water supply, to retain ratepayer dollars in Los Angeles to fuel our local economy rather than exporting those hundreds of millions of dollars outside of the City of LA for imported water, and to develop local sources of water supply which are more reliable in the long term. We've collected and analyzed data on MWD price trends, studies on water reliability and job creation potential of local water projects, as well as spoken with various experts. We're almost done compiling this information, and we use it to educate the City Council and the public once we have that report ready. And while we are pleased to see an increase in local water supply level in this preliminary budget over last year's funding, which was disastrous, we believe that we need to invest much more in stormwater capture, groundwater replenishment, and conservation. And we'll be making a strong data-driven case that the city must continue to increase these investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Aura Vasquez.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Aura Vasquez. I'm here representing the Sierra Club. I am very pleased with this presentation, as excited to see that as DWP is transforming our power supply and replacing 70% of our power. Sierra Club would like to really translate their excitement to hear that a big chunk is going to be translated to energy efficiency programs, and that this is part or a big priority for part of this preliminary budget. We are especially interested in to see how these energy efficiency programs will translate to savings to customers. So as you put together your budget, please let us know. Also, we were pleased to see that the coal transition is also part of the budget, and that by 2015 we are seeking to move away from a green power generated industry to a more green renewable industry here in LA. So our question is also to see how is this from now until 2015, how is this plan gonna work out? So how is this gonna happen? We all know that the power doesn't just come from the switch, but it also actually takes a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. So we are curious to know how this transition and how this replacement strategy is going to happen. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next speaker is Kathy Seal. Oh, okay. The next speaker after that is Jasmine Vargas.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the presentation and everybody's efforts. I'm also with the Sierra Club and presenting the Beyond Coal campaign. Sierra Club locally has about over 45,000 members, and our campaign has been going on for the past 2 years. I actually had the opportunity to speak to the commissioners last year in June when you had a joint meeting at the City Council. And I spoke about the transition from coal and the, to local renewable energy and energy efficiency. And I'm very pleased to see the preliminary budget and making sure that the priorities for that budget are exactly those two things, to make sure that we're moving towards a future of renewable and away from dirty coal. I would like to also mention that the energy efficiency target of 8.5% is below 10%, as Ron has mentioned, and I support the endeavors to see how we can make it to 10%. However, I think that since we are increasing the energy efficiency budget, instead of leaving it at 8.5%, which is what we've been shooting for, we really have the opportunity to shore up all of that excitement for energy efficiency in our, in LA from the ratepayers, and really increase that 8% number to over 10%. In fact, 15%, making it 1.5% every year until 2020. I would also like to mention that the transition to coal, I think, is a great step forward. Transition away from coal.
If I can change your position.
I know. I should cover the beyond part of my T-shirt. No, but really, to answer the question that Commissioner Moss had, for example, nationally today, EPA just released their proposal for new source performance standards for new power plants. And that's really going to change the makeup federally on the regulation the EPA has to coal-fired power plants, and that's really going to change the way that coal power is going to cost. It will raise in cost, not just because of new regulations, but because of increased cost of coal. And so moving forward, I hope that we're able to transition and make sure that we're keeping, local energy revenues here instead of out of state to coal power plants, and also just getting cheaper energy, right, for our ratepayers from solar instead of dirty, expensive coal. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Kent Minalt.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm from the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign as well. Thank you for the presentation. It's just an education to constantly find out more and more about how you have to juggle rates and the necessity of upgrading an aging system. So I actually kind of threw away the things that I was prepared to say here, because I kept thinking about what the energy upgrades, the efficiency upgrades I've done in my own house, the benefits that I've got from those, and I was listening to the rate conversation that you gentlemen were presenting, and it's like between 4 and 5% proposed rate increase. And I just looked at my heating bill, compared December of this year to December of last year, and it was 20% lower because of my efficiency upgrade. So I'm thinking, well, from my point of view as a customer, the benefit to me of an efficiency upgrade enormously outweighs the pain of what would, in my case, probably be a $5 a month increase in costs. And so here's my question. How much more of a rate increase would it take to bring the energy efficiency goal up to the state mandated, above the state mandated 10% instead of well below it as it is now?
Thank you.
Okay, that was the last speaker.
Just a couple of points. Commissioner Hall, did you have anything else? Yeah. Ron, did you say you were going to be coming forth with a 5-year financial plan?
We will be, yes.
Okay. I think that'll be very helpful, and I'll address some of the issues that Commissioner Moss raised. I think the other thing that would be very illustrative and would really edify this group as well as the City Council, I think we should take a couple of items like the energy efficiency dollars we have and cost those out. So let's assume we did go rather than 8.5% but to 10%. What would that cost? And similarly, let's take the pipe replacement program, where let's say we went from rather than 320 years to 200 years. Because I think it really will inform our discussions here if we have a sense of what we're really wrestling with here. Does that make sense?
$2 a month versus $4 a month.
Maybe it's
Whatever it
$10
is,
a
right.
month. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, and
We absolutely can do that.
okay, good. Anything else for the good of the cause?
Got a motion on the table.
Is there a motion?
And just as a clarifying point, this is a preliminary budget.
Yes.
What we're asking you to vote on today is releasing this budget as part of the process. It is a budget that is predicated upon a rate increase. We will be having extensive public discussion on top of the extensive public discussion we had last summer, just as a reminder, on these issues, fine-tuning the discussions that we had last year on this, and ultimately whatever is adopted with respect to rates will influence the final budget that could result in, even after the adoption, which has to be adopted by this board roughly the May timeframe to get down to the City Council. It could be adjusted would ultimately on a practical basis would have to be adjusted predicated on what comes out of the rate side of this. So this is a step, a multi-step in a process earlier than it used to be to get this information more in line with where the rest of the city is.
Also, Ron, you'll have a better sense of the water purchase from MWG.
Yes, absolutely, correct.
So we'll submit the final proposed budget to the City Council in May?
Correct.
Is there any reason they can't act on that in July, so we aren't being forced to implement the rate increase in 9 months rather than 12 months?
No.
No, there is no reason?
No.
No.
The issue is we will adopt a budget
In May,
in May.
right.
at the end of the day, in all practicality, that is a budget, is a provisional budget predicated on rate adjustments, and the time frame is that it's going to take some time beyond that. I don't see a means by which there can be a rate adjustment approved by this board, ratified by City Council by July. And I don't believe that's achievable, particularly in light of an expanded process that we have for ratepayer advocate review on that.
There's a motion on the table.
Move authorizing transmittal of the preliminary budget.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any objections? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Anything else, Barbara?
That's it.
Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all.